Okay, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for having me. Thanks for filling this room and just making Orlando great. So, real quick, I just want to kind of go over, starting with kind of my story, the Real Thread story, and then just talk on really kind of three things, being products, processes, and people. Okay, so. I went to high school in Indiana, came down to Orlando to go to UCF. I just wanted some warm weather. I wakeboarded a ton, and so I wanted to ride all year. And that's really what brought me down here. So went to school, started off in engineering, quickly got out of engineering, and got into finance and accounting, oddly enough. So I ended up graduating from UCF in finance and accounting, and in that process, I was purchasing a ton of shirts, okay? And so I was involved in a couple organizations on campus, and everyone here in town was using one organization to print their t-shirts, okay? So I said, hey, I know nothing about printing t-shirts, but I should give these guys a run for their money, right? So I try to learn how to print a t-shirt. I find a company in Seattle that's willing to train me. I go up there, I train, learn how to use the equipment, come back, and take an order for 1,000 t-shirts, not knowing anything or any way to do it. And so anyway, that was kind of the beginning. So as I kind of went along printing t-shirts, the organization kind of transformed a couple times, okay? And so the niche that we were serving and who we were, I mean, when I started a company, I was 21 and had no idea what I was doing. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay to start when you don't know what you're doing. It's okay to fail, to pivot, and then try something else, okay? And so I've done that a couple times until we landed on Real Thread 4 years ago, okay? And so, but in that process, the classic story of small business, I think, is technician, right? They start doing something, they're very good at what they do, okay? They make a great product. They can find an audience to buy it, to serve. And in the process, they may grow very rapidly because they're kind of a superstar. They just are very good at what they're doing, and they serve a lot of people, and they just do a great job. And in that process, while they're growing that business, they hire employees, right, to help sustain this growth. And in that's a lot of times where there's some problems, right? Shipments get delayed, right? We can't hit the demand. The product was a little off. Whatever the problem may be, problems start. And in that, the entrepreneur kind of thinks to himself, hey, this never happened when I was doing this by myself. The problem is the people, right? And so it always comes down to the people. But in there is the process, okay? And the people are the inputs to the process, okay? And so how I've looked at the organization and how I've, tried to morph Real Thread over time used to be very product focused, right? How are we going to make the best product? And didn't consider what the inputs were a whole lot, right? But again, the inputs are what have a direct relationship on the output, okay? You can't have an output without an input, right? So in that, as I've grown and as the organization's grown, I've tried to kind of shift my thinking and tried to continue to learn and develop and grow and focus more on the inputs, and the outputs will then a lot of times kind of take care of themselves. So that's kind of a little bit of the framework is the product, the processes, and the people, okay? So why does all this matter, okay? So why is the process, kind of the process is in the middle, right? You have the people are the inputs, the process is kind of the middle ground, the generator, and then there's the product on the output. So one thing that I've really, I've just grown into and become passionate on is, again, focusing on that input, okay? What are the people, okay? Who are the people? How do we serve them as a leader, okay? How do we care for the people that then work in the process that then move to the product, okay? So again, as we make, the talk of today being make, you know, that is just kind of the framework that I've kind of grown into and used to continue to grow an organization, is the people, the process, and then finally the product. And a lot of times I think it's looked at in reverse. We always focus on the product, and the people are kind of, I mean, they're a secondary thought. And so, you know, again, my take on it and what I've kind of grown into, I didn't start like this by any means. I'm not smart enough to start, you know, with what I now think is what's right. But focus on the people, they're the input, let them work the process, and then end up with a great product, okay? So that's kind of, again, that's kind of the framework that I've grown into over time is, you know, that's kind of what it takes to put out a great product. And so anyway, that's, you know, focus on the people. So anyway, getting into a little bit of the people side, okay? What does it take to make them love what they do, okay? That's really important. A lot of us are leaders, designers, or whatever it may be. We want to love what we do. So what does it take to create that environment for them where they can really, really love what they do? There's a lot that goes into that. And so as leaders of organizations, creatives, there's a design element in all of that, okay? Design isn't just graphical. Design can be people, systems, processes. How do we design all of those things to provide a great experience for the people that we work with and serve? Because ultimately, they're the only thing that's kind of lasting. Products come and go, organizations come and go. But the people that work in all those are relationships that we're gonna have for years, or should have for years. So they're the longest and most, they have the longest shelf life, if you will, of any of those processes, right? Products come and go, processes change, but people we work with for a long time, and we can continue to work with years and years and years. So again, the main thing that I wanna iterate is, the input, okay? Focus on the input, let the process work, okay? Let the people influence the process, but set them up for success in that process. And then the output, okay, will then you know, take care of itself. So so again, as leaders, input, process, output, put a lot of your time and effort, I think, into that input. So anyway, that's a little bit of that you know, that shaping that process that I've kind of grown into over time. I used to focus very much on the product, and then moved into the people side of it. So product, processes, and people. Those are the three big pieces, okay? So in that, we'll get into in a little bit the actual environment that at RealThread that we use. You know, obviously we're a screen printing business, working with creatives and designers and printing great stuff for them. So it's a very hands-on process, and so we want all of you guys to experience that. We have a press set up, so all of you guys can get hands-on and actually print your own shirt here in a little bit. So I want to get into that. I don't want to talk too long, yeah, so let's get into that. In the meantime, or next, I'd love to open it up for questions. You know, you guys have a lot of great questions, I'm sure, and I'd love to answer those. So yeah, if we can do that now, I'd love to open it up, Rob. Yep. So how much time do you want to allot for Q&A, and then we can print?
Just do like 10 minutes.
Great, okay. So anyway, sorry. Sean?
Yeah, how do you want to focus on people as your input? How do you start there? Like if you're like dreaming of an operation, a business, an organization, clearly you're going to start with a product, something in mind. So can you start, I guess is the question, can you start with that paradigm? Or does it have to change once you get product focused first?
Okay, so the question would be how at the beginning, at the start, I think,
Right.
do you put people at the start as you're kind of dreaming up the product and that, is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a great question. I think the way that one way I think is considering the process in the middle, okay? So looking at that process of, you have product, process, and people, right? The people, they interact with the process, which then spits out the product, right? So I think how can you, as you start to come up with the idea of the product, what are the processes that the people are then going to interact with? So I think one of the biggest things that you can do in terms of the people, making sure they love what they do and love their environment and all that, is look at the processes that they interact with on a daily basis. You have to first craft those processes for them of how you're going to end up getting to the product. So craft a process that they're going to enjoy interacting with, I think. That's going to set them up for success. One thing I say all the time in terms of our sales team to our production team is how are we setting them up for success? So as we give them the input, they then work on the output. We need to give them a great process to start with. So how do we set our people up for success as leaders shaping the organization? We just need to put them in a position, I think, and again, set them up for success with great processes. Yeah, how are you?
Good. Oscar.
Oscar.
What are some of the, if you can share this, specifics? You mentioned, you not altering, but you're shaping the environment for them towards success. Are there specifics that you can kind of hey, this is something we've seen that's been really helpful in making them successful?
Yeah, so what are specifics that we can do, I think, to help the people become successful? Is that?
No, I mean, for you, like you said, the environment or the tools they use, their process, that's what helps to make them successful. Is there anything your teams are doing that's unique to you guys that makes you successful?
There's a lot of pieces to that. Some of them I think they start at the highest level in terms of vision and purpose of the organization, making sure the team and that you're working with understands that and can see that, and is excited about that. I think that's kind of the start of it. There's a lot of pieces though, again, that shape that. So I think specifically, I think rewarding or recognizing is a big piece. I don't think we've even done a great job of this by any means. It's just always changing and morphing. And again, I think that's a good thing. That's one of the things that keeps me going. Is there's always something to improve upon. But I think specifically is being really clear on what's expected. And I was listening to a podcast of a friend and client, Sean McCabe from Sean West. I don't know if you guys know him. He's a great designer in Texas, okay? He was talking about his kind of client relationship and how, as the professional, as him being the designer, he's responsible for laying out all of the expectations up front. If someone's unhappy, he takes it on himself because he didn't set the appropriate expectations. And I think doing that on the front end, setting the appropriate expectations, is one of the most beneficial things that we can do to set our team up for success. What is actually expected that creates success? So those expectations are they're hard to set a lot of times. They take a lot of time and energy. And when we're busy, it's not always the thing that we want to put our time towards, right? But I think those expectations are one of the biggest things that can be done. So, yeah. Hey, Cindy.
As you have been evolving, has this affected how you look at hiring?
It certainly has in the terms of, sorry, the question was, has growth and evolving changed, and maybe the whole mindset of people before products maybe, has that changed the way we look at hiring? I think one of the things that has definitely changed in terms of hiring is getting as specific as we can in terms of the role. Ideal situation, someone's responsible for one thing, they're accountable for one thing, rather than like a plethora of things. And so that lets you really target the person and the type of person you're looking for. And again, just focusing on someone that can do that really, really well. Because if they do it really well, it's likely that they have some sort of gifting towards that, right? And so that is probably an element that brings them a lot of fulfillment. So, I mean, one thing that I was having a conversation with the other day with someone on our team is, what are the activities that you can do or that you're doing right now that you can fire yourself from doing in 3 months? And so if we consistently look to say, okay, what activities am I doing that I should not be doing in 3 months, and working towards firing yourself from those activities and getting more and more specific so you spend more of your time on your giftings and your passions, that's certainly one element I think that has come into the hiring process, is that being as specific as you can. So, great question. Thanks, Cindy. Yes, sir.
Right in the coattails of that question, so you start out, you're kind of like you're the sole proprietor of this business. What is it like to hire someone for the very first time, to take on the responsibility of kind of, this person's livelihood essentially, and what were some of the pitfalls and hurdles you had to overcome there? Or what did you learn from that?
So, the first hire, I think, and what have I learned from the first hire? How do we avoid some things? I think most of us would say our first hires, I think hiring friends, a lot of people say don't hire friends. And I'm actually all for hiring friends. However, hiring friends, I think, makes you be even better laying out what's expected. Because if you hire a friend and it's not very clear what's expected, the relationship goes sour. As a working relationship, so does the friendship a lot of times. So I think a lot of us, our first hires are generally someone we already know. There's already some kind of connection. It's not just a cold hire, if you will, So I think a lot of us kind of use that as kind of that like a little bit of a softer introduction, because that person obviously already has some sort of trust in you as a person if they're willing to come work for you. So I think that helps us on our first hires, and I think that's okay to hire a friend first. But again, those expectations, laying those out, what's expected of them, to save the relationship, should the working relationship not go well, to save the friendship, you have to be very, very clear up front, I think, on those expectations. So, yeah, being as clear as you can on those. Hey, how are you?
Hi. You said you're focusing mainly on the front end, like the people and the input, and the product will take care of itself. And I wondered, as you went through your learning process, how did you see your product improve as you learned how to build your business like this?
So how did, as a entrepreneur, hiring people, how did that change in terms of the product itself, I think? How did that get better over time? We're never the best at everything, like on an individual level. So as you hire more people, you can hire the people that are the best at those things. And so if I was the best on the product side, the manufacturing side, I wouldn't hire someone to do that for me. I would maybe continue to do that. There's a little bit of I use like an 80% rule, whereas if someone can do something 80% as well as that's a good delegation. So I think though, as we hire more people, we can hire people that are better than us at that skill set. And so the product has gotten better because there's people that are better at the product than I ever was. I also started with a partner that was on that side of things. And so he handled all of that, and that was his skill set, that was his gifting, that was his passion, was the product side. My passion was the client side. And so partners can be great in that regard. But even at that, hiring, you can generally hire people. You should offload the things that you're not gifted at, hire people that are gifted at those, and then that's just gonna increase the standard of that work. So, is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Hey.
Hey there. My question is, now that you have a product and you're hiring people and creating the process to deliver that product, would you allow your people in your process to create a new product and say, guess what, we print posters as well as shirts, or we build cars now because our people in our process have shown the expertise in that? Like, would you let your focus on that, create a product, or is your product hiring t-shirt printer guys now and driving your people?
Is the question more geared towards diversifying in terms of like offerings?
Would you let your people in your process create diversification, or will you say, I want to add cars to the line?
Right, okay. I think in terms of that diversification, that's something that I think as the leader, you have to have the vision. Does this fit within the organization? And if it does, and when you start, you generally want to like niche down, right? As small as you can get. And once then you gain an audience, then you again start to have a platform where you can add those products. And so I think the question, or that I would use to kind of filter that is it the right time to add this product? Does it fit within our customer base? Is this a direction we want to go? And if that's your decision as the leader to go in that direction, I'd say let your people run with it. But if it doesn't fit in the organization, if it's not time, then I would reserve and say it's just not the right time. That's not that it won't be in the future, or we need to stick to something that our current customer base would appreciate. I think it's a little bit of a timing thing, and then just a kind of a vision and overall direction that the leader has to cast and direct.
Let's do one more question.
Great. Who's got it? Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned that you went to school for accounting and finance.
Yeah.
So how did you get into design?
So the question was going to school for finance and accounting. How did I get into design? It was simply by necessity in terms of wanting to start screen printing. That's the only reason I got into design, is because if you want to screen print, you have to have a design element, right? So I was never the designer. My brother was a very talented designer. He was kind of the first artist. He went to Clemson. He and some other, we were all in college at this point. So he and some other, schoolmates were the designers. And so I learned, started in Corel Draw. So I learned some pieces in Corel and then transitioned into, Illustrator or whatnot. But I never have been a designer in terms of on a graphical side. Again, it was only by necessity that I learned small little bits. So that was something that just, again, wasn't my gifting. Bring on someone that is gifted in that area, who at first happened to be my brother. So, yeah. Thanks, Kimberly. Is that it?